We are here today with Sean Kelly, an Irish politician who is a member of the European Parliament and a member of the group of the European People's Party. Mr. Kelly, could you please tell us of the scope of your work for the new Green Deal?
Yes, the Green Deal is a big deal for Europe because it's the European Commission's response, which was outlined by Ursula von der Leyen to the climate accordances which we see every day of the week in our own areas. Climate change has to be tackled. Europe has responded very positively, both in terms of taking action themselves, but also hopefully in giving example to the rest of the world. There are many different aspects to the Green Deal. There's the energy performance of buildings, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and even CAP reform, all are involved in it. And of course also the Recovery and Resilience Fund is primarily focused on dealing with climate action. For me, at the minute, I am rapporteur for the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, where we're assessing what progress has been made and how we're going to deal with this issue into the future. Because buildings in particular are a huge challenge. Right now, they take 36% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from buildings. They use 40% of our energy consumption. 75% of our buildings are not energy efficient, and 85 to 90% of those buildings will be still standing and used come 2050. So we've got to do a big job, and each of the member states has a big responsibility.
Great. What are your suggestions for how the European Parliament may improve the Green New Deal or strategies you would suggest to reach these goals?
Well, obviously we're looking now at all the targets we set only a few years ago. I was the rapporteur for the Renewable Energy Directive. We now have to look at that in light of what they call the Fit for 55, so that we can reduce emissions even further by 2030, so that will have to be looked at and recast, as they said. The same applies to the energy efficiency. That too has to be re-looked at and the targets set higher. And of course, in terms of the energy performance of buildings, we have to look at how we're actually going to ensure that there's a massive retrofit program carried out right across the European Union. And one of the areas which we are involved in right now is asking each of the member states to put forward their long-term renovation plans. The strategies they have for this whole area, almost every member state except one has those now submitted to the Commission. The Commission are going to look at them, and one of the suggestions I have made, which has been taken on board by my parliamentary colleagues, and indeed also well received by the Commission, is that we should come up with a template for the long-term renovation strategies, which would be used as a kind of a benchmark for each member state to say, this is the ideal, how can we reach that ideal? So we have to apply both carrot and stick in these instances. Obviously, the resilience and recovery funding will be available. There'll be many other financial instruments as well. But also there has to be a bit of a stick as well, where there have to be targets, and those targets will have to be met, and not just met in the long term, met in the short term, and that will require ongoing monitoring by the European Commission and what's actually being achieved in the member states, almost, where I'm concerned, on a yearly basis from now on.
Great. So that kind of leads into the next question, which is, what is the future of sustainable construction within the new Green Deal?
Yes, sustainable construction is a big challenge, but it's a great opportunity because it's going to create millions of jobs across Europe. Also, it would ensure that young people who are looking at a career, that they can say now that there's a big future in construction in whatever other area they want to be involved in, be it direct instruction, be it as plumbers, architects, electricians. So we have to ensure that there's actually emphasis put, particularly in terms of career guidance for students, to look at this whole area, because there's a massive opportunity there, because with new builds and retrofitting, public and private buildings over the next 20 years, it's a job essentially for life, where people can progress. And we're also looking at ensuring that this will be given priority, not just in second level education, but particularly in third level education, with emphasis on vocational training and degrees. I know that in my own country, we have now for the first time technological universities, and one of the key areas there would be to focus on vocational areas so that people can get good quality degrees and then put those into effect when they go out into the workforce, especially in construction. And of course also the whole question of upskilling will be very important for those who are already in the industry to meet the opportunities that will be there, because new technologies will be coming on stream. So people will have to be familiar with them, and also of course we'll have to have a very accurate assessment of the energy performance of buildings themselves. So that will also require a lot of intelligence, and artificial intelligence can be used from that, smart metering, etc. All that will have to be interlinked. So data is going to play a big part. So really the sustainable construction is going to encompass an awful lot of areas, but we need to encourage people to get involved, and we need to encourage those who are already involved to upskill if that's required, which I think it will be.
Brilliant. So I understand you are drafting an implementation report for the EPBD, of which the construction sector is a big part. So could you please tell us how that specifically is related to sustainable construction and everything that's going on in there?
Yes, the implementation report is going to be vital because it's going to assess, and we've already done most of the work, the situation on the ground in each member state. And then that will feed into the Commission looking at proposals for the next number of years. So that's going to be vitally important. And we will look at all areas, and particularly, as you said, sustainable construction. One area which will be very important is the whole area, for instance, of insulation, to look at where the materials are coming from. Because there's one thing to make a building energy efficient, but then you have to look at how are the materials, the raw materials being used, how energy efficient are they themselves? And for instance, replacing fossil fuel-based insulation with forestry and wood insulation. All those are opportunities which will be very, very important, because we have to look at the entire life cycle, and the sustainable construction will have to take all that on board, and that will require looking not just at buildings in themselves. You'll have to look at the raw materials, where they're coming from. You have to look at forestry. Is there enough there to keep us going into the future, to supply what's needed in terms if it's pellets or materials, timber products, etc. So it has to be basically circular economy, looking at every aspect of it and see how we can improve it. And I think that's something we're doing. And then, most importantly of all, getting the member states to buy in and to put their plans into action immediately.
Right. So how do you think those member states could best adopt these policies and put it all into a plan in order to reach these goals?
I think that there's a certain reluctance in a lot of member states regarding their commitment or enthusiasm to do this. They're just, some of them just ticking boxes, but ticking boxes, they must be told, is not the answer from now on. So their long-term renovation strategies will have to be analysed very comprehensively here at a government level, and then go back to them and say, ABC is okay, DEF is not, go and change it. Let us see the detail. Let us see how you're going to actually ensure that you have enough people work in this industry to make it happen. Let us see how you're going to implement this in your own buildings, public buildings, how you're going to incentivize people working and living in buildings, how they're going to do it in private buildings, but also, which is very important, the whole question of landlords, their buildings, and before they rent them or let them to tenants, to ensure that the buildings are the highest caliber, so that the burden doesn't fall on the tenant, or the tenant is not in a position to do anything about making the buildings energy efficient. So all those things are hugely important, and the Commission is going to really have to put down the boot and ensure that member states cover all these ankles, that they have a plan, and then the plan must be monitored. And of course, you have the whole area then within the buildings themselves, the appliances that are being used, smart appliances, be it fridges or freezers or washing machines or whatever, all that. And then, of course, you have the whole opportunity to utilize energy efficiently at the right time. And of course, smart meters can do that. So it's a big, big opportunity. It's very exciting. But unfortunately, for many people, in relation to the Green Deal, in relation to climate change, it doesn't seem to be the sexiest of topics. They much prefer to putting their energy and talking to about renewable energy and wonderful wind turbines to be seen all over the country or out in the sea. They look better, they look more immediate, but in actual fact, the big opportunity here is in buildings, because coming back to my point in the beginning, 36% of greenhouse gas emissions, 40% of energy consumption coming from buildings. Well, if we can tackle that, then we're going a long way to meeting our targets for 2030 and hopefully being carbon neutral by 2050. If we don't, it's not going to happen.
Great, brilliant. That kind of answered my last question, which was I was going to ask you about the greatest barriers to overcome when it comes to sustainable construction and reaching those goals within the new Green Deal. Do you have any other restrictions or barriers that you think that reaching sustainable construction might face that you would like to add?
I think the main point is that this will come down to the attitude of the member states. And it cannot be a long-term attitude. It's too easy for a government that's facing election in 2 or 3 years' time to set targets for 5 years' time. That's not good enough. So I think the key here will be an ongoing review every year, so that the minister responsible for housing in every single member state should be brought in, questioned every year, to say 2 questions. What have you achieved this year? What are you going to achieve next year? Because otherwise, they love to talk about 2030 and 2050 and wonderful plans that we have, but they don't have to implement them because they'll be gone by 2050.
Yeah.
And that has happened too often in the past. I saw it in my own country. We had targets for 2020, which governments effectively ignored because there was nobody there to say, hold on now, you do nothing? Why are you doing nothing? Now we have to say, you do nothing, you've got to do it right now and this year.
Right.
And so I think the Commission is going to have to show real strength in this regard, because it's the Commission, as you go back to your original point, Ursula von der Leyen basically hung her hat as a Commissioner on the Green Deal. She must make sure now over the next 3 years that we see the delivery, because if you get delivery over the first 3 years, then it will be easier afterwards. And that's really the target.
Right. Well, thank you so much. That was the last of my questions.
Thank you very much.
Center for Sustainability, Innovation and Good Governance really thanks you for undertaking this interview with us. And we will be posting it on our website and LinkedIn pages, if that's okay with you.
Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
We must get the word out. We must get action.
Yes, we need to take action.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Much appreciated.